The Galactic Council chamber fell silent as Ambassador Mara Ellison stood before the assembled delegates. Two towering figures flanking her on either side. Rexil and Nexa, once the size of house cats, now stood nearly 7 feet tall, their fur rippling with bioluminescent patterns that marked them as fully matured Felinar warriors. The chamber's atmospheric processors hummed louder, struggling to compensate for the collective intake of breath from 300 species. "Impossible," hissed the Draxian representative, his scales flashing crimson with disbelief. The Alpha's offspring were abandoned. They should have perished within cycles. Mara's lips curved into a knowing smile. She remembered the day, 15 standard years ago, when the Felinar Alpha had arrived at Earth's orbital station. Desperation, bleeding through his dignified bearing. His species was losing a war against the Void Collective, and he needed humanity's military might. Earth had refused, still recovering from its own conflicts. Humanity had declared itself neutral in galactic affairs. The Alpha had done something unprecedented then. He'd placed 2 tiny cubs, no bigger than Earth kittens, into Mara's hands. Their eyes hadn't even opened yet, and they mewled pitifully against her palms. "If we fall, someone must remember the Felinar," the Alpha had said, his voice breaking. "Will you show them what it means to survive?" He'd never returned. Reports confirmed his battle fleet had made their last stand at the Crimson Nebula, taking 3 Void motherships with them before being obliterated. The Felinar homeworld went dark shortly after. The species was declared extinct by the Council, save for 2 cubs in the care of a human who'd never asked for such a burden. Mara had brought Rexil and Nexa to Earth, to her family's ranch in Montana. She'd expected the hardest part to be explaining to her parents why she'd brought alien kittens home. Instead, her father had simply built them a heated shelter in the barn, and her mother had researched what proteins their biology might need. The cubs grew, but not as expected. Felinar matured rapidly in the wild, reaching adulthood in 3 years. Rexil and Nexa took 15. Human doctors theorized it was Earth's gravity, its atmospheric composition, or perhaps the diet. Mara suspected it was something else entirely. She'd raise them as she would any child, with patience, discipline, and love. She taught them Earth's history, from the ancient civilizations to the world wars to the unity accords that had finally brought global peace. She showed them humanity's greatest achievements and darkest failures, never shying away from the truth. Rexil had been fascinated by military strategy, spending hours studying the campaigns of Alexander, Napoleon, and the modern peacekeeping forces. Nexa absorbed everything about diplomacy, law, and the delicate art of building alliances. Together, they learned what their father had hoped humanity might teach: how to survive when survival seemed impossible. But they'd learned something else too, something uniquely human that no other species in the galaxy had mastered quite the same way. The Felinar are not extinct. Rexil's voice rumbled through the chamber now. His vocal cords adapted to produce harmonics that carried authority across species boundaries. "We are here. We stand. And we have brought friends." The chamber's viewport eye-rised open, revealing the starfield beyond. Mara watched the delegates' faces as they processed what they saw. Hundreds of ships, not the sleek warships of galactic navies, but converted freighters, colony vessels, mining barges. Each one bore the insignia of different species. Species who'd been displaced, defeated, or dismissed by the major powers. "What is this?" demanded the Vrelian High Commander, his antenna quivering. Nexa stepped forward, her movements carrying the grace of a diplomat and the coiled readiness of a warrior. "This is the Forgotten Legion. We are the species you left behind, the refugees you deemed not worth saving, the worlds you abandoned to the Void Collective's advance." Mara had watched them build this over the past 3 years, since Rexil and Nexa had finally reached physical maturity and chosen to leave Earth. They'd gone into the galaxy not seeking revenge or demanding recognition, but offering something radical: hope to the hopeless. They'd found the remnant Korvax, Survivors of a species the Council had failed to evacuate, living in asteroid bases. They'd discovered the Drift clans, nomads whose home stations had been destroyed, wandering the void without purpose. They'd recruited the Ashend, a silicon-based species whose sun had been extinguished by void weapons, while the Council debated intervention protocols. To each, Rexel and Nexa had offered the same thing their father had sought from humanity: alliance, not charity; training, not pity; a chance to forge their own destiny, rather than rely on powers that had already failed them. "You have no authority here," the Council chairman declared, his translation matrix struggling with his species' anger pheromones. "You are not recognized members." "We don't seek recognition," Mara interrupted, her voice carrying the calm certainty that had governed her 15 years of raising 2 alien cubs into leaders. "We're here to inform you of a reality. The Void Collective's advance has stalled at the Outer Rim, not because of Council fleets, but because the Forgotten Legion has held the line." She activated the holographic display. Battle footage played above the delegates' heads, converted cargo ships using guerrilla tactics, coordinated strikes that conventional military doctrine would consider impossible, civilian vessels transformed into defensive platforms that held against void dreadnoughts. "Humanity taught us something your species have forgotten," Rexel said, his eyes reflecting the starlight from the viewport. "When you have nothing left to lose, when you've been counted out and written off, when survival itself becomes defiance, that's when you're most dangerous." Nexa's bioluminescence shifted to a pattern Mara recognized as determination. "Our father asked humanity to remember the Felinar. Mara Ellison and her people did more than remember. They taught us that survival isn't about superior firepower or Council recognition. It's about adaptation, resilience, and finding strength in those the powerful overlook." The Draxian representative's scales had shifted from crimson to pale yellow uncertainty. "What do you want from us?" Mara fielded this one. "Nothing. We're not here to ask for help. We're here because the Forgotten Legion is taking responsibility for the Outer Rim's defense. We'll hold the territories the Council has deemed strategically unviable. We'll protect the refugees you've classified as resource drains. And we'll do it without your authorization, or your gratitude." "This is preposterous," the Vrelian commander sputtered. "You're a collection of defeated species and inexperienced younglings led by a human who isn't even military." "We're survivors," Rexiel corrected, and something in his tone made the chamber fall silent. "And humanity taught us that survivors don't need permission to keep surviving." The Council erupted into debate, but Mara was already turning to leave, Rexel and Nexa beside her. They'd said what needed saying. The galaxy's power brokers could debate and deliberate. The Forgotten Legion had work to do. As they walked toward their shuttle, Nexa's tail brushed affectionately against Mara's shoulder, a gesture from cubhood that still brought warmth to her heart. "Your father would be proud," Mara said quietly. Rexel's ear twitched, the Felinar equivalent of a smile. He chose the right teacher. Behind them, the Council continued their arguments, unaware that the balance of galactic power had already shifted, not through conquest or political maneuvering, but through something simpler and more profound. 2 orphaned cubs. 1 human who refused to let them fall, and the lesson that Earth had learned through millennia of its own struggles. Sometimes the mightiest legion isn't forged in victory, but in the refusal to accept defeat. And sometimes, the greatest leaders aren't those who command armies, but those who were shown, by someone who cared, what it truly means to survive. The Forgotten Legion jumped to hyperspace, ready to defend those who'd been left behind, carrying with them a very human truth. Nobody stays forgotten if someone remembers to care.